all your school rugby, all in one place. This is NextGen 15.
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the NextGen 15 podcast. And Dan Richards is back in the hot seat with me. How are you doing, Dan?
Yeah, good, thanks. Sorry I've been AWOL past couple of weeks getting my back sorted out, and then a bit of time away in the States for Thanksgiving. But in that time, a huge amount has happened in the schools game. I know you guys have been talking about, but really glad to be back and excited to talk through what's been another massive week and some huge games coming up.
Yeah, well, you've been around the globe and all sorts, and missing out on the World Cup as well. It's Wales' first World Cup. Can't believe you've missed that.
I got to watch the US game in Rockefeller Plaza, so that was quite cool. And then,
I bet that was cool.
And then, we won't talk about last night, no. But it's it's.
It could be worse. Scotland didn't even get there, so it's fine.
Happy St Andrew's Day, by the way.
Very kind, thank you. There'll be some haggis on the table later tonight. No. I've got people coming over who are vegetarians though, so we'll see how that goes. No. Might have to whack a vegetarian sausage in somewhere. It'll be fine. You can find us on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, and get in touch on @NextGen15. We'd love to hear from you. Dan and I, a little bit later, going to be talking through some of the things that make a school coach a good school coach. And the reason we're talking about that is because very soon we're going to be picking the coach for our greatest team of the decade. And we want to hear who you think that might be or who you think it could be. So please get in touch with us on that. But we're looking forward to that little chat. But first, a bit of news and an apology from me, actually. I've been telling everyone to give Bromsgrove a shout to give them a fixture for the weekend. It's not Bromsgrove at all. Denstone College could do with a fixture this weekend. So give them a shout. It's just at first 15 level. Everyone else has got one. But if anyone's got a fixture available to take on Denstone College first 15, give them a shout. They're very happy to travel if needs be. They're also very happy to host if you need to go there. So if you're struggling, give them a shout. Doing our bit to
nice.
Fixtures. Yeah. The other little bit of news this week is that the Lambs nominations are open. So anyone that doesn't know how that works, heads of rugby from across the country basically send in their nominations for players that they think would be a good Lambs player. And they all go for a couple of I don't think they're trials anymore. I think they're development days these days. And they all have a play, and then a squad is put together, and they play various fixtures through January and February, and then over the Easter holidays they go on tour. And I think this year they're actually going to get to go on tour because we're allowed to travel again, which is quite exciting. Yeah,
no, it's nice, and I think I would say to kind of any coaches, players listening, I've been lucky enough a while ago now, best part of a decade, I'd like to be involved with the Lambs and with Alex and Chefs doing that, and it's just great fun rugby. It's probably some of the better, the way they approach the game. You get to play some incredible games at some great venues. You might get to go overseas, but it's a good avenue for kind of if you're maybe frustrated that you're not getting a look in at an academy setup or something like that. Have a go at this. It's another shop window that you can go off to uni and just play some more rugby in a different environment, get some different coaching. It's a really good fun thing to be involved in. So I would encourage heads of rugby, but also if you're a player and you think give your head of rugby a nudge and just sort of say, look, I fancy having a crack at this because it's really worth it. It's a really worthwhile thing in the schoolboy game.
Yeah, big time. I mean, their catchphrase is fast and free in terms of the style of play that they go for, and it is the players that they look for are guys that are happy to have a go, back their skill set. Just kind of have. I mean, if you think of the Barbarians and then you put a schoolboy pink shirt on them, that's basically where we're at. It's very cool stuff, and not too dissimilar off the field either. They have a good time, which is always good. We've seen some cracking fixtures with them actually. Always high scoring, just mad games of rugby. But it is amazing actually. I think you say about being a possible pathway. The advent of Buck Super Rugby one of the things that I found amazing is, on a weekly basis, I'll see messages from the Lambs going, "Oh, great to see, whoever playing at tight head for Exeter University, former Lamb, and all that stuff." It's incredible the number of players
Oh
that
yeah,
come
the
through.
kind of like the alum is really good, and particularly through that Bucks Super things, because I think you can't be involved in the academy to be involved. So quite often there aren't guys that go straight into contracts, but
Yeah.
rugby's a late maturity sport, and we know that. Yet we don't seem to follow it with talent I do, and then there are loads of boys who've come through. So yeah, just again go for it. And again, particularly guys from schools who maybe don't get as much coverage, don't get as much spotlight. So, and that's a really nice thing as well. So it's, again, if you can be, struggling in a side, maybe so there's all sorts of. It's just a great outlet, a great other opportunity to get some different rugby, a different rugby experience under your belt.
Yeah, exactly, and a cool shirt as well. Elsewhere, what else have we had? Oh, well, the latest Next Gen 15 Schools Rugby Table update is out, and it's all changed at the top.
Yeah.
And it all changed at the top in an unusual way, in that Clifton College have gone from first to third, but have actually increased their points total. But Trinity have increased theirs, so stay in second, and Harrow have increased theirs even further and go to the top of the table. It is tight, 3 points separating the top three. Which basically the system it works on, that equates to a 0.3% chance difference between Harrow winning versus Clifton, which, to be honest, sounds about right. Like, those three have, I think, this season set the standard at various times. Harrow Trinity, though, in a couple of weeks' time.
I was going to say, the fact they're playing
on Thursday, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about the Cup quarterfinals, which are, there's some great games, but I think that one, from our point of view, has to take top billing. And probably winners will come through it as favourites, and we'll say that puts a target on their back, but that target is there already. We're not adding anything there. So massive game. It'll be a really exciting one to watch.
No, big time. I think what I've been taking away from this, I mean, it's got its rights and wrongs, just like every other table, but the thing I've been really taking away from it is so close at every sort of section. So I think this year there probably are three teams that are just above the rest in terms of their performance. You then have that Sedbergh, Millfield, Kirkham group, which again is pretty inseparable. You then have this sort of stretch from 7 to about 20 something, where you go, anything can happen. These are all just very good teams, and it is amazing just to see how bunched it all is in those various bits and pieces. But I suppose we should talk about those Schools Cup quarterfinals, because when Will was on as a guest last week, we sort of we looked ahead to the possible sort of quarterfinal matchups. The draw was literally being made as we recorded, which was helpful timing as ever. But the draw has been made, and it's so they keep splitting it sort of north versus south now. So North Midlands are pooled together, and South London South East and the Southwest pooled together. But those 4 quarterfinals: Kings Macclesfield against Finborough, RGS Newcastle v Oakham, Marlborough College against Blundells, and Harrow v Trinity. The live stream a week on Thursday. They're 4 very good games, but the standout for me in terms of across all the games is actually that there are some teams there that are massively underrated this year. Kings Macclesfield have only lost to Sedbergh. Oakham unbeaten. RGS Newcastle have only lost to Sedbergh. Harrow and Trinity both unbeaten. Finborough just absolutely flying. The records that some of these teams have is actually extraordinary this year.
Yeah, no, it really is, and probably some schools who will feel that like we should have talked about them a bit more. Rightly so. I think for me, but after that kind of southwest kind of match, Marlborough versus Blundells, again, 2 sides who, are known for producing good sides, kind of, always steady, but then every kind of 4 to 5 years we'll have a really strong side, and that Blundells group looks good, as does that Marlborough. And Marlborough had a great win at the weekend, so that'll be a really interesting game. And I think probably after that kind of Kings Mac versus Finsborough game is we keep kind of Finsborough, how much we know, how good are they, and again, like Kings Mac, look as strong as they've been.
Yeah.
Probably for over a decade, so if not longer than that. And and great to see a state school in Finborough getting to that last eight, with that side kind of probably led by Junior Kapoku. And it's that there's great games, but for me that and then RGS Newcastle, Oakham is again a great challenge. Oakham looking.
I always think of them as being two sort of classic cup teams for some reason. They're always knocking in and around those later stages.
Yeah, good histories in it, and as I think Oakham have pushing the way through, haven't lost again, and it's that winning becomes a habit. I always think it's a tough one this year because these games come for a lot of these schools. It'll be potentially their 13th game in what's a pretty short period of competition time.
Yeah.
So you also can get some topsy-turvy results, because look, I would be amazed if any of those schools can put their best 15 out at this point of the year. So it becomes a bit of a test of depth, whereas because there's quite a big amount of recovery by the semi-final, you might get some boys back again. This is a little bit about depth. It's about who can find the most emotional energy, at the end of, when it's a bit dark, miserable. You've probably got kids doing exams as well at some
yeah, exactly. There's a lot going on.
It's a really, really tough period in lots of ways. And it could well be, I guess you can get some energy. It could well be last run out for some of the upper sixth because again, just again, look at the list again, majority of those schools would be traditional one-term rugby school. So there's a kind of lot of going on in the background at each of them that they'll talk about, which will just adds to the occasion.
Makes the captain's chat in the huddle quite an easy one, doesn't it? Do you want to wear this shirt again? That's how many times will that line be said during those quarterfinals?
A lot.
I'll tell you what they say. I mean, obviously, all four games are going to be pretty exciting. That Harrow Trinity game stands out, but it stands out for a number of reasons, because I remember in March 2020, before the world turned on its head, one of the very last games was Harrow against Trinity in the under 15s. I think quarterfinal, and Harrow win it at the death, slightly controversially. Although James Melville will be on to me for saying that it was slightly controversial, but there was a late try that won it for Harrow, and it was just the most spectacular game. But that group of under 15s is this group of upper sixth, and they do it again. I mean, if there was an easy team talk for all of them in terms of do you want to wear the shirt again, there's an even easier team talk for these two. It's very cool, that one.
And I think you will remember this better than me, but Trinity raced out to a lead in that game.
Yeah,
and then
Harrow plugged their way back,
clawed it back. So I can't remember. I think we were still going in on our side as well. So it's so much. I know that you'll be there streaming it. There's a lot of layers to that game.
Oh yeah.
So which
be very cool.
Which adds a challenge actually for coaching staff, which we're going to talk about. Which adds a challenge, because actually controlling that emotion. People say old fashioned. Who wants it more? Who's going to work? Like, those boys are going to work hard. It's actually who can control that, who can temper that, and remain kind of disciplined and precise in their decision making. It is, for me, what will make the difference, probably, because two sides who look pretty evenly matched on paper. Games aren't played there, but it's interesting. Fantastic
game. Every angle that you look at it from, it's an awesome game. That's probably the only angle that it's a shame on, is that it's come at the quarterfinal stage and it can't come later on in the competition. But if that's the only fault you can find with it, then it tells you an awful lot about the quality of the game. It is worth having a quick look at the plate, because the quality of matchups in the plate is extraordinary. Barnard Castle against Solihull, Bloxham against Haileybury, Monmouth against Wimbledon College, and RGS High Wycombe against Epsom College. In another year, if someone went, those are the cup quarterfinals, you'd go, okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
they're just top class games.
Yeah, and it's, I think Haileybury will come on to talk about, seem to be hitting a nice bit of form around the right time. We talked about Monmouth right at the start of the year, as to go back, RGS Hokum always tough in a cup.
Yeah.
One of those. So that's some incredible size in there, and that's why it's great that competition exists. I think that we want to encourage you to come in this, but if you do get on the wrong end of a result early doors, there's another great competition to get involved in, and that's fantastic and exciting for those boys who again will be pretty motivated going into those games.
Yeah, and actually, there's some decent sort of travel on the fixture front. How often will Wimbledon College head off to Wales to take on Monmouth? How often are Solihull going up to Barnard Castle? They're quite cool fixtures from that point of view of just playing someone completely outside of what you normally would.
Yeah, which makes cup rugby special, doesn't it? And you're actually probably in some ways some more intriguing sort of geographical matchups there. And because travel brings with it different challenges as well. So yeah, that's just for all 16 teams involved across those cup and play quarterfinals, we say just embrace it, best of luck, enjoy it, and look forward to seeing how those games go.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to gloss over the Vase and Bowl, not because we don't want to talk about the Vase and Bowl, but because they're playing their sort of regional finals this week. So although the draw's been made, the quarterfinal lineups are a week behind. So we will give them a shout out next time up. But I guess we kind of touched on it with what Haileybury have been up to and things. So we may as well look back to the weekend that's just gone and a new development for you, Dan, while you were away. So Limitless got in touch with us here at NextGen15 and said, you guys need kit. And we were only too happy to agree with them on that. And as part of the kit supply, there'll be some kit on its way to a certain Mr. D. Richards.
We all love stash.
Everyone needs stash. And as part of that, the top 5 school teams of the week, the top 5 school teams of the weekend is brought to you by Limitless.
Nice.
So that's a cool development and a warm really development cool for those of us that are standing on touchlines. I'm very excited to be wrapped up nice and warm because it makes a bit of a difference. Particularly, we had a long summer this year, but it's starting to get a little bit peaky out there.
Yeah, it's turned. Yeah, you need the right coat, you need the right layers on. Yeah, no, it's important to be well dressed on the side. Can't concentrate otherwise.
Well, exactly.
You can't commentate properly if you're cold, can you? So it's
No, trust me. Well, I always tell the story of doing Millfield against Clifton last year, and I had got to the end of the game. It was so cold. I could barely speak, and I had the last thing I had to deliver in commentary was the scoreline, and I had the producer in my ear talking me through it, team by team, number by number. It was literally Clifton, and then I would say Clifton College. I could not get my words out. It was so cold, but we got through it and got to the end.
Complete brain fade.
I had Tom Whiteley and Harry Ashall from Bristol Bears alongside me in co-coms for that, and I reckon by about 60 minutes they'd gone, we can't speak. We're of no use to you anymore. It was absolutely freezing. But to matters of the weekend just gone, I suppose. And I suppose, why don't we stick with Clifton College and that game against Blackrock College? Extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We were there live streaming it, and it was. I expected it to be sort of a less than one try between the two teams, sort of a game. Particularly when you consider what Sedbergh had done over at Blackrock, and then you kind of can think, well, Clifton are kind of at that Sedbergh level and possibly even a touch better this year, so it's probably going to be round about the same, a score here or there. And it looked that way until through the first half. It was 6-5 at half time. Really well worked try from Blackrock to score just before the break. And then they scored again straight after, and it was almost as soon as they got their noses in front, the game changed on its head. It had been a game that was all about defence. Blackrock were quite happy to kind of stick with that from their point of view, going, well, we still back the defence. Clifton just couldn't get through it, and yeah, as the game went on, Blackrock found their way across the try line a few more times and ended up with a 32-6 victory that kind of, I was going to say, looks more dominant than it was. It sort of does and doesn't look more dominant than it was. It was a really even game for a really long time, and then Blackrock, perhaps in that way that you see some professional sides do, they just kept the faith, kept the patience, kept knowing that at some point what they do would start reaping rewards on the scoreboard, and boy, it did.
Yeah, it was a funny game, wasn't it? And then, you know, I'll come on to the Sedberg piece in a minute, and maybe Sedberg should be in that sort of top 3 convo in light of this result. But I think you're right. You're watching 25 minutes and you're just kind of blown away by actually, you know, Clifton, a lot of ball. You know, what stood out to me was the quality of Blackrock's defence, you know, individually and collectively, the fact they were all on the same page, you know, who clearly such a well coached side of the game there, that they, you know, and yeah, the players working hard and buying into the system that they're running, and kind of having an answer for what Clifton threw at them, which Clifton hadn't actually. Again, Kirkham did it, I guess. So kind of maybe they took a few lessons from that, but that was really impressive. And you kind of think, okay, this is probably going to be like a 12-9 type
it felt
game.
That way, didn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a war. And then, as you said, there's kind of a little bit of a touch of class, you know, something really creative. I don't know the name of the Blackrock 10, you know, which is, sorry, apologies.
O'Shaughnessy, I remember. I haven't got the notes in front of me, but I remember his name. O'Shaughnessy.
Seriously, kind of a bit of magic. Maybe that knocked the wind at Clifton. You know, you kind of go and you're a bit deflated. You've been probably ready to go, and then again that kind of bang bang either side of half time, and then I think you're right. It was pretty dominant from there. You know, surprising, and momentum can shift on things like that, and momentum's massive in sport. And Blackrock looked pretty comfortable in that second half. You know, away at the close, and you know, and that brings in, you know, Clifton will be disappointed. You know, they would have wanted to, based on what Sedberg had done, they would have wanted to put a marker down. You know, they want, undoubtedly, they want to be, you know, want to be in that mix for the, you know, top team of in the country this year, and that, you know, they're not involved in a cup. They didn't go to St. Joe's. You know, they probably needed to win that game to sort of to be in that conversation. They're still in it, but it's, you know, they you know, that will kind of, it's a difficult one to sort of go with them now based on that. And then I think it probably also makes Sedberg, you know, actually I'd love to see Sedberg play against, you know, the fact we've got Harrow and Trinity playing each other is so cool. Like the fact that Sedberg, you know, they should actually Sedberg will play Clifton next year, because Clifton will come into the school championship, which is fantastic. Yeah, but the more we can see these top sides against each other, the more intriguing it is, and that would be fact, because, you know, the fact that Sedberg went over to Ireland and won, and then Blackrock have come over to Clifton and won is incredible. But yeah, you know, hats off to Blackrock.
Well, I was interested in speaking to their coaching staff afterwards. They were very honest in saying that is the best they've played this year by a long way. They just went, you know, the sort of line was, we knew we had that in us, but we've not pieced it together yet this year, and we finally pieced it together. And they were strong their particular strength to me was at 8 and 9. And if you've got 8 and 9 being your best 2 players on the field, so often that just means, particularly in a game where defence was quite dominant, you're in dreamland, because you've got someone there that's getting you on the front foot, and then you've got a 9 whose great strength was his sort of tactical kicking game, basically. So they were going forward, and they were just territorially exactly where they wanted to be, and then playing with a defence that was going, get through us if you can. So they were just consistently putting Clifton into their own 22, and then just going, play out, we back ourselves. And that's a very pro outlook on how to play the game, but it's also so hard to play against, because as we all know, territory is kind of everything in rugby if you've got a defence that you back.
Yeah, and it was 100%, mate. And it was, I think you're right. It's that they play it in a very sort of adult, professional manner and executed, a clear game plan. The fact they kept Tom Bowen, who arguably one of the most exciting players anywhere this year. He just couldn't find a way to properly get into the game. Which doesn't say anything about Tom. It says a huge amount about Blackrock's defence.
Yeah. He's a huge amount about their defence and a huge amount about the quality of their kicking game, that they were prepared to rely on the boot, but also good enough to keep it away from him.
That chase of that kick, was amazing. It's interesting again, the kind of the set piece gnaws in me. That part of the game was fascinating. Clifton scrum pretty dominant the first half. You could argue in an adult game they might have got carved there. Does that change things? But then I was really interested in the second half, that now whether anything got changed, like in terms of what they were doing, but that Blackrock scrum kind of came back collectively. Like, did Clifton run out of a bit of gas, or did something change? And when both lineouts were kind of, both sides getting decent, kind of platforms there. So, and because when you see us, because Clifton did a few scrums kind of really go forward, like motor forward, and I was like, well, that seems to give you an indication they're going to have some sort of physical edge up front here. But actually, that did not materialise. Like, Blackrock were fronting up incredibly, and then whatever it was, they turned that round, and they actually were, putting that Clifton scrum under huge pressure in that second half, and maybe that's again a bit of a momentum thing, tails up, trusting yourselves. But it was a kind of, if you want to see an example of an executed game plan, it was a really good example of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely nailed it. I guess though we should. Well, actually, I'll tell you what. Before we get into the sort of full top five, because I guess, well, maybe there could be. I was going to say, I guess the Irish sides probably aren't really eligible for the top five, but we could have a debate about that. But another one that actually might just worth touching on is that there was another side from across the Irish Sea that came over. Northern Ireland's Ballymena Academy came across on Friday to play Kirkham Grammar School. Kirkham Grammar again just showing their quality. 49-12 victory. Just Kirkham Grammar keep on impressing. The only fault I can find with Kirkham Grammar is that they've not played enough top teams around them, so making a judgment on where they sit is so hard. The only thing you can do is look at that Clifton game from early in the season and go pretty high. Very, very impressive.
I think it's I don't think this. I mean, this with there's no Kirkham play a particular brand of rugby, and when that comes off, that can mean they really, really, can put teams to the sword.
Yeah. And
then if you're able to match that physicality with their own physicality, I think we've seen that Kirkham sides can struggle a bit. It's a bit, their coach Aled Welsh is kind of a little bit kind of Warren Ball-esque, isn't it? To go to the in terms of a Kirkham approach. Yeah, and look, that's a hard way to play. It's hard on your body, and we see that at St. Joe's, that actually it's really hard to translate that style of rugby into a short tournament format. They're right in that mix. Like Ballymena Academy, probably less well known to our audience than Blackrock, because the Leinster schools system gets a bit more coverage than the Northern Irish one. But they're a top school. If they were playing kind of in the English school system week in, week out, we'd be talking about Ballymena Academy a lot. And so that's an impressive result.
I claimed this last week. I'm going to look it up now, because last week I claimed it was where Willie John McBride went to school, and I'm convinced it was. But let me just have a look.
Trust yourself.
I'm going to back myself, am I?
I believe in you, mate. I believe.
There we go. He was educated at Ballymena Academy. Brilliant. There we go. I don't know how I knew that, but
sort of thing that gets stored.
I'm a rugby nose, I suppose. That's the issue with that.
In the rugby genius of Angus Savage, that's impressive knowledge, mate. That is impressive. And again, that's a great thing to know. And great, probably English fans would probably say Martin Johnson, and then we're talking a bit over probably most of our audience's head here, but probably the best captain to have ever played the game there. And so
absolutely, I remember watching his speech to the 2001 Lions. What was this line? Today you're going to have to dig into the very depths of your soul. That's a hell of a line. Probably doesn't apply that much in modern rugby because they've probably been told, don't think about it like that. Just here's the game plan. Be very chilled and relaxed about it. Don't worry. But hell of a line either way.
Yeah, a pretty emotional leader, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Right, let's start whittling down though some teams to get into this this top 5 this week.
Yeah,
and a sure thing has got to be Haileybury.
Yeah,
going down to Whitgift, late winner for a 2019 victory at Whitgift. I've not looked into it, but I don't think Haileybury many times will have gone down to Whitgift in the last 15, 20 years and got a victory. But they did it on Saturday, and hats off to them.
No, again, relatively new fixture, I think in terms of, and, Michael Owen, another former British Lion, Grand Slam winning captain, has been at Haileybury a while now. Kind of that's a great program. It's got some really high profile kind of alumni there, but and they put together some good teams, and that's great. Look, this, with not meaning any disrespect, it's not a classic Whitgift team, but it's a Whitgift team, and any Whitgift team is going to be hard to beat, particularly at home. And there's some really high quality players in there. They're a very proud school. They're probably a bit wounded at the moment, to go through the end of term, but they will. I know Wilco will be whipping them up to kind of try and get some sort of to get some energy out of them going into, because again they've got plenty of 15-a-side rugby next term. But so great result for Haileybury there, and I think that probably inks in the first one in our kind of limitless top 5 for this week.
I just as soon as I saw that one come through, I was going, well, that's a banker for top 5. It was an awesome one for Haileybury. He'll be training with a skip and a step this week, that's for sure. I suppose. Well, let's stay in Croydon. Why not?
Croydon,
John Fisher, last play of the game to beat St Benedict. Not been a classic season for John Fisher, but I tell you what, moments like that are the bits that you'll pick out in 10, 15, 20 years time when you're sort of looking back and go, I remember that time, last minute of the game or last play of the game, we came back and won it. Yeah, they're the ones that stick with you, and they're pretty special moments, aren't they?
Yeah, those boys will remember that for a long time. A game with a huge amount of history, actually. A Catholic derby, so which adds a bit of kind of bragging rights on the line there, and schools who've played each other a lot, and kind of two schools who, if you look around, that I guess if you go back to around that late sort of first 15 years of the 21st century, pretty dominant sides, particularly.
They've had their years where they've been arguably top team in the country. To
2012, and both want to get back there. And look, Benny's are pushing really hard, and I know they lost a couple of boys, but they also brought a couple of really good players in, and I think there's talent at John Fisher, and they've had
definitely.
They will have been a bit frustrated by the loss to Campion, but they've had a better second half of the season. What's really interesting now is, they take on Hampton this week. Hampton, who we'll probably talk about their game next, because I think they're off by probably.
You're an absolute pro at this, Dan. Segueing like there's no tomorrow.
So I think look, I think so. John Fisher, I think we would probably get our second prize in that limitless top 5, and then that does kind of move us into Cranley, I guess. We haven't, and in fact we've talked about not quite having the year that we've not that we expected, but a year that would have gone down as a classic Cranley year. Hampton, we've said dark horse, top 10 side, and they've just and I think probably most people would have fully expected Hampton to win that game based on record of what teams have done. And it's
well, let me put it this way: I pick out 10 fixtures each week for people that I sort of think will be
the 10 to
great
watch.
games, and I don't think I included Hampton Cranley, which in a normal year I would always include, because I thought just the way things are this year, it's quite likely that we know sort of what's going to happen there. Turns out completely wrong.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, isn't it? That, going into St. Joe's that first half of the term and beating, they actually now have a tough start to the second half of the term. With the loss to Trinity in the cup, followed by that loss, probably an unexpected loss to Cranley, who, Cranley, amazing result for them. A really proud rugby school who, for the last 10 years, they've taken home a lot of silverware, and they've always been that kind of. This is probably the first year they've not been in a top 10 conversation for over a decade.
I'd say
so. Really nice for them to rightly earn a place in that Limitless top 5. But that game, those two teams now, Fisher and Hampton, going up against each other this weekend is a really fascinating one.
It's going to be spicy, isn't it? Yeah, very
kind
spicy.
Of Fisher build them a bit of momentum with, I think I've said before, a group that I feel's got a lot of potential. Can they get that kind of snowball, moving down the hill? And all of a sudden, Hampton, probably half turn came at the wrong time. They had it flying. They've now had 2 tough results. Can they get it going against what will not be, what will be a Fisher team who will not roll over? It's at Hampton. That'd be a great game to watch. That. So
yeah, that'll be an awesome game, and there'll be a lot riding on that. But shout out to Cranley, because that's an awesome effort. That's their performance of the season.
Yeah,
and they bit of momentum just to go into the last couple of weeks and finish with a real flourish. They'll be feeling.
Yeah, who do they have to finish off?
I'm actually not sure. Who have they got? Away at Marlborough.
Oh, and obviously Marlborough flying.
Yeah.
And also maybe with an eye on the cup. So
that's
what do Marlborough do? Do you try and go into it to build momentum? Do you try and keep some bodies fresh? Interesting one. That's a really interesting game.
That is going to be very interesting. Very interesting. Couple of other games from the weekend. I don't think these are really top five ones necessarily, but Kings Macclesfield Sedbergh really interested me because Kings Macclesfield have been incredible all year. Sedbergh was always going to be their toughest test, and it was always going to be result of the season if they took home the victory. But what's kind of clear, just from looking at the score and from what I've heard, is that they threw everything at it and had a good old go, and came away with plenty to be proud of in defeat, 46-20. But shout out to both sides there. Really similar one in terms of shout out to both sides, although this one much tighter. Barnard Castle against Durham on Friday night. With the Durham school social media account was messaging me in private on Friday night, talking me through the scores. It was an absolute nail biter. They had a massive lead. Barnard Castle did really well to come back, and then it was 3 points here, 3 points there for the final 5-10 minutes or so, going this way and that, and makes things interesting as we look ahead, because I think next week. I think this weekend is Barnard Castle against RGS Newcastle, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, it is Barnard Castle against RGS Newcastle. So that's going to be very interesting.
It's there's all sorts going on there. I go back to that Sedbergh game again. I think you're right. Kings Mac deserve a huge shout out for that there, but also so impressive from Sedbergh to back up after that. That is. To use an American football term, that would be what you call a trap game. You've played Wellington College on the windiest night in history on the Wednesday night, and you've come out of that. You've come out of that with the result you wanted, but pretty battered and bruised in a game that was really collision heavy.
Yeah.
And then you've got to go away to a strong Kings Mac team who are in a Schools Cup quarter final, who will be more, who would be so amped for a scalp. It says a lot about that will have tested Sedbergh's depth, and it says a lot about the culture there at Sedbergh that they're just able to back that up in that way. So
massively. I'll tell you what, on their depth, we live streamed the second 15 game as well, and my goodness me, have Sedbergh got some depth. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but Finn someone at number 8 for Sedbergh's second team. If he was at quite literally any other school in the country, he would be starting at number 8. The issue for him at Sedbergh is that the first choice back row for them is also unbelievable. But he was Finn Baker, maybe. It'll come to me at some point. But let's have a look through some other teams for this top 5. Then let's go up to Scotland, because there's a couple of games there that we spoke about. The Scottish Schools Cup semi-finals. Edinburgh Academy winning 26-19 at Stuarts Melville, and Merchiston Castle, the reigning champions, winning 19-14 at Strathallan. 2 great results. Both teams now head off to Murrayfield week on Wednesday. Just very, very cool. I mean, any of those schoolboy experiences where you end up playing in the National Stadium are just awesome.
Yeah, and the fact that it's essentially going to be a derby between kind of the kind of big boarding school around Edinburgh and the big day school. I worked with a guy at Blundell's, Ed Saunders, who'd come now being director of rugby at Edinburgh Academy, and they were pretty passionate about that derby game with Murky. So well done to those 2 sides. Tough to lose in a semi for Stuarts Melville and Strathallan Bullets. Look, great games, and as you say, like, if you get to National Cup finals, playing at national stadiums, just the whole thing around it, for their families, for their friends, for the whole school, just such a great experience. So huge congratulations. And look, we can make a case that both those sides have ever placed in the top 5. Can we merge it and make us? I would argue, can we make the Scottish Schools Cup finalists?
Squeeze them together. I mean, look at what both games as well.
Sponsors, can a top 5?
Can a top 5 be a top 6? I'm sure it can. But both games really close as well. Edinburgh winning by 7 points, so trying it. Murky winning by 5, trying it. Yeah, they are close games of rugby, which is exactly what you want a semi-final to be.
And it's nice that we're seeing more it feels like we're getting more Scottish schools, English schools interaction, I feel like I'm learning more about the Scottish game, like maybe because obviously we're doing this, I'm taking more of an active interest in it, but there's, that we've talked before about the schools game in the north getting stronger, some traditional names really pushing their programs. There's more Anglo-Scottish games emerging up there, and Murky with their festival and stuff like that. So it looks as though the kind of age grade game in Scotland is in a pretty decent place at the moment, which is nice. That's always healthy for any country. So really
hugely, because if you look at the sort of recent history of the Scotland under 20s in particular, they've really struggled. So a healthy school game will make a massive difference, because the worry that you look at with this sort of the relative weakness in the last 3-4 years of the under 20 program is that what that means for Scottish senior rugby in the future is that they're going to have to look to players that have become Scottish and things. Whereas if you can get that 18s, 20s going really nicely through the schools program, suddenly your player pool just expands by a massive amount, because you've got that many more people being exposed through the pathway.
And I could be wrong on this, and someone in Scotland correct me if I'm wrong, but I think for a long time that kind of pathway job into it hasn't necessarily been full time. Whereas obviously there's a much more money put into it in England and even in Wales actually. And I think they've created a full-time position now, a couple of full-time positions, which again hopefully sees the program kick on again.
If you want to know anything about the seriousness with which the SRU are now taking it, John Fletcher is heading up things, and pitch side for Sedbergh versus Wellington College, Peter Walton. in his Scotland tracksuit. That is a pair of very good appointments.
Yeah. Like, again, gurus of the age grade game, like both. And so I think that's really nice that Walter's got involved as well. And look,
well, back where he belongs, he's a Scotland international. I don't know what he was doing hanging around with the England setup for so long. He's back
exactly.
in his rightful home.
I think, and by his own claim, still a reigning Five Nations champion, isn't he?
Yeah. He's the holder of the Five Nations.
Five Nations, is
yeah,
that right?
Exactly. 99. I've still got the shirt. Get a lot of stick when I wear it because it definitely doesn't fit anymore. But
Sure it does, mate. Sure it does. But no. So that's, look, it'd be, as you said, they haven't always gone that well in kind of age grade internationals. So it'd be really nice if they could start pushing a bit, because at the top end, Scotland seem to be going pretty well with some incredibly talented players, and actually some incredibly talented boys. If you look at the likes of Adam Hastings, obviously he stuck with Scotland through age grades, and Cam Redpath, when he's fit, I know he came through the English system, but now very much, he's Scottish. When you Brian Redpath's lad, he's Scottish.
Dad's a 50 capper. So I think you're definitely Scottish.
So there's some good, there's kind of a pipeline, it feels like, for a first time in a while in Scotland, and that's a really good place to be.
No, definitely. So
let's finish. We need to finish off this top five.
We do indeed, and we'll either have, we'll work out what to do with the Scottish schools, but let's have a little float around, and I'm going to pick out a couple of options for you, and then I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it in your capable hands.
Oh, pressure.
We like to do it that way. Keep pressure on. One that we didn't discuss, but I think is worthy of a shout out. Eastbourne College 31-5 against Caterham. Probably expected them to win that, but a shout out more for the fact that they've been absolutely flying this year, going really well. Eastbourne. So I might give them to you as one of your options. Marlborough College 19-17 away at Bromsgrove. As you say, trying to keep that momentum going. Tough place to go. Playing very well. Stamford and Oakham 29-all draw. Oakham unbeaten this season. That's the closest they've come to being toppled. Stamford, who've kind of gone up and down, but it seems the harder the opposition they play against, the better they do. They beat Stowe right at the start of the season. They then face Oakham late on in the season and draw against them. And then a little shout out to Harrow as well for just continuing to just blast on. I'll give you those three to choose between.
Yeah.
You can have Stamford, you can have Marlborough College, and you can have Eastbourne College.
Yeah, okay, I'll go through another team I just would shout out who won't make it but close would be Eton. Again, we talked, just quietly having one of their best years for a long, long time. Again, probably could have in this year have managed some tougher opposition. How that Harrow game goes to round off the kind of the block fixtures, that's a fascinating game. And they'll be, they will know that, we've talked about Harrow a lot, and Eton will be, that'll be a really fascinating fixture. So, right, between those three, look, I think Eastbourne are going great, and I think we put them in the top five after the
I think so.
And Ollie's, Ollie Torrey does a great job down at Eastbourne College, a great head of rugby. My old place in Caterham and stuff like that, and they just seem to be struggling. They've got a good group. They've got some good young players coming through there. So next couple of years they might get back to their peak, but probably a result we expected. So I think kind of honourable mention to Eastbourne, probably between Stamford and Marlborough for me. Marlborough going up to Bromsgrove is so impressive, and again, exciting game for them this week. But I think it is just that, again, the fact that Stamford have such a fortress at home, and that kind of not stopping, but kind of putting a bump in the road for Oakham by, I think deserves a place in the top five. So I will go Stamford for the final place.
I like it. I think I would have probably leaned that way as well, which means that our Limitless top five school teams of the weekend for week 13 are Cranley, Haileybury, John Fisher, Stanford, and the Scottish Schools Cup finalists, Merchiston Castle and Edinburgh Academy. Not that we're bottlers. That sounds a bit like our Ben and Tom Curry situation, but we'll take it. Let's quickly look ahead to next weekend then. We've already mentioned a couple of the games, Hampton, John Fisher and Marlborough College against Cranley, but there's a few that stand out to me. Actually, one of them that really stands out to me, a massive state school game, Sir Thomas Richards against Northampton School for Boys. That's going to be very cool, and both playing on quite a similar level, I think. So I think that should be an absolute cracker of a game.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, that's again, be pretty physical, that game. I reckon. I don't know who goes in as favourites there, really. Like they've both had some great results. Both had some results we've been like, oh, surprised they didn't come out on top.
Yeah, I think the draw might be top of the card there.
Yeah.
Another one that's really interesting because they found a little bit of form. It's been a tough old season for them, but they've hit momentum now. Brighton College, three wins on the bounce, hosting RGS Guildford, who we've spoken about loads of. Every time they've been met with a challenge of a sort of major scalp, they've taken it on. Here's another challenge. Go to Brighton College, massive team. Can RGS Guildford do it? Can Brighton College keep that recent momentum going? I think that's a really cool fixture in this year particularly. Yeah,
that is, in terms of, post that Eastbourne game, kind of Brighton in a really good place, a great win at the weekend for, Nick's galvanised the group clearly. And again, can Ben Dudley doing a hell of a job at RGS Guildford, kind of getting them back kind of in that sort of, competing with those top schools. And so again, it's momentum looks like it's with Brighton, but as you said, Guildford just keeps standing up to each of these challenges. So really interesting game.
Definitely is. Another couple, I'm going to group these two together because of what's to come on Thursday next week, which is Epsom College hosting Harrow and Trinity hosting Eton College. So obviously both of them will never admit it, but they'll have half an eye on Thursday coming up. Harrow travelling to Epsom. Yeah, Epsom not having their best year ever, but that's not an easy place to go. Trinity hosting Eton, who we've already spoken about as having had an awesome season. Trinity cannot really take the foot off the gas in that at all. So they're two really difficult games for our two sort of leading teams at the moment in many ways, who then have that huge fixture against each other on Thursday. That makes Saturday intriguing. Yeah, and obviously a massive mistake for me. I thought it was Harrow Eton, and obviously it's not. Eton are playing Trinity, so apologies to everybody for that. That was a huge mistake from me. Yes, again, it's that we've talked about this before. Do you? And it's we're going to come on and talk about coaching. Do you say, right, we want to build momentum? We're going to go full strength against really tricky opposition, but we want to get kind of keep winning's a habit, all that sort of stuff. Or do you say, right, actually our main focus, is the cup right now, and so if we need to, we're gonna risk this kind of Saturday block fixture. What's nice, and I hope is that they're going ahead, and we've seen kind of schools cancel games on big Saturdays before in the past, but I'm sure Harrow and Trinity will honour these fixtures because they're towards the end. I think it helps that the game is on a Thursday, I suppose, doesn't it? Yeah, it just gives you that extra bit of time to get ready. I would also imagine you get into kind of like last games for upper sixth and stuff like that. So it means a lot to the opposition. But Marlborough and at Eton, that's a hard one. How you manage your group there? Again, tricky, isn't it? A test of your depth. Again, how good's your group? Do you have a look at a couple of under-16s who you think might make the cup squad? Like, is it that time, or is it too big a game? It's a big decision. The half game rule complicates that, as we've talked about before. So it's fascinating games. Games there. There's loads and loads of other really good games that we're running a bit short of time on, and we really want to talk about coaches. So I'm just going to rifle through just a few of the standouts. Bromsgrove hosting Clifton College, had a Clifton College bounce back, had a Bromsgrove bounce back from that defeat as well. Haileybury Berkhamsted, that'll be a very cool game. RGS Newcastle, Barnard Castle, Sedbergh, Mount St Mary's College, Woodhouse Grove, St Peter's York, 3 quite exciting fixtures up in the north of England. I think Mount St Mary's travelling to Sedbergh is quite interesting. Mount St Mary's have performed pretty well, but they're sort of unheralded. Tunbridge against Wellington College, I think, is really interesting. That'll be a big test for Wellington. Tunbridge, though, slipped up is a tough term given that they were playing Radley, but they'll be wanting to bounce back. And then a real classic between two of the oldest rugby playing schools in the world, Rugby against Cheltenham College. That'll be an interesting one as well. Loads and loads of other games going on all weekend. Obviously, hundreds across the country. Can't give them all a shout out, but do let us know what happens in them, because we want to give you a shout out if something cool happens. That's for sure. Last minute tries are always a guaranteed way of getting a shout out. But Coach of the Decade, we're gonna get into who the Coach of the Decade is probably next week. But I kind of want to set the scene for what we're looking at when we talk about a great schoolboy coach, because it's not the same as being Eddie Jones or Steve Borthwick or someone like that. It's a very, very different job. First of all, you're a teacher. Yes, so I guess we'll start with, tell me about what that looks like in terms of that balance between being a coach and being a teacher and being in a boarding school, being kind of in loco parentis, like all of that stuff going on.
Yeah, look, and probably this is just my take, and different people listening, different heads of rugby, parents, pupils will see this really, really different. I think what you said at the start there is almost the most important, that your metrics, for want of a better word, are so different for success. And that's where, we spend a lot of time talking about that kind of that scoreline metric, because we're focusing a lot on top end, and it's cool to talk about challenge. But actually, when you're in the middle of it, what you're focusing on is building good relationships with your group. Again, as a teacher, you understand, because you've got your planning load, your marking load, your reporting load, all of that stuff. So that the kids have their homework load, their coursework load, they're getting ready for exams, particularly at the top end of the school, they're preparing for IB examinations, A-level examinations, they're doing their UCAS statement. You've got to empathize with that. Again, these games at the end of the term are, but then in assemblies this week, all of those guys will be having about, you've got to get your UCAS done. You've got to get, that you're, you've got to make sure that so they're being bombarded at the moment. This time of year is really, really tough and quite often young people are exhausted at this time of year, so I think managing that, having some empathy, for what's going on, the challenges of being a young person, I think, from certainly when I was, it's so different now being a teenager. And so I'm not going to say I get it, I'm old enough to have grown up without social media and stuff like that, but can you understand all of those different pressures that are happening in their lives? In terms of rugby, I think it's an interesting one in that people get, again, in my experience, it's not about the easy part is coaching the rugby side of it. We will talk, let's go back to what we talked with Blackrock. I talked about how well coached that defence was, professionally level coached bit of defence. There are loads and loads again, there are so many great technical coaches in the schoolboy game. People know their rugby. That's not the bit we struggle to get expertise at all. It's about building that culture for me. Can you get the guys to buy it? So do you care about the young people you work with? Do you know about them? Do you know about, what's happening with them in their home life, in their academic life, where they're applying to uni, what they want to do? Are they going to uni? If they just want to get an apprenticeship, can you be part of that conversation? And I would say, metrics for success, and this is a very personal thing, again, would be, how many guys are involved in the game at 25 at any level.
Yeah.
Like, producing professional players, age-grade internationals, is a result of that individual primary's hard work, as well as the support of their family, their club coaches, their academy coaches. That a schoolboy coach does not produce internationals on their own. Programs create cultures where those sorts of things, players like that, can flourish, and we can talk about that as part of the bigger piece. And then also kind of how invested are people. Do old boys show up to fixtures? Do they care? Are they invested in your? Because to me that shows that the rugby program has been a key part of their experience. I would always say we wanted rugby to be the thing that guys look back on with the most fondness. That they look back and smile and say, that was one of the highlights of my time at school.
Yeah.
And I think if schools are doing that, as well as enthusing people about the game, then that's what I would say makes great coaches, great schoolboy coaching, as opposed to kind of, we've got, we've said before, I'm a scrum nose, as opposed to we've got the best set piece. Because that's a little bit out of, only a small handful of schools would have their head of rugby have any input over what the group looks like.
Yeah, the group is the group most of the time.
Yeah, you're dealt the hand you're dealt. So then it's about, well, what can I control? What values can we try and help instill in these? And I think, and stuff like that. That would be my take. I mean, again, you've been around the school.
I guess you have to view it as well from the point of view of most pupils and most schoolboy rugby players, which is that the rugby is an escape from the rigors of school life. When I wasn't a great player by any stretch, quite an average one, to be honest. But I kept playing the game up until COVID, to be honest. Not very often, but all based on the back of what had happened at school, where it was an escape. It was it was a good laugh. I enjoyed hanging out with my mates in training, and then I enjoyed playing games, and obviously I loved the game, but it was why keep playing? It was because playing was good. It was an escape. It was a sort of let's go have a laugh and enjoy ourselves and all the rest of it. And it's trying to get across to people sometimes that weird juxtaposition of the entire purpose of doing it is because of the enjoying it, having a laugh, getting to be with your mates and all the rest of it. But then also that juxtaposition of going, but I'm in a foul mood if I lose. Trying to explain to people that both things can be true at once.
And we've had that, but there's nothing we shouldn't. Again, I'm not being anti-competition. We've told that we're both very competitive people. I've never gone into a game, when I've been part of a coaching and preparing a team, saying we don't care if we lose, but what we care about is the people. We care about how you do. Like, if the results go against us, I'm not going to be mad because the scoreline is against us. You just want the group to do themselves justice, and I want you guys to have the best experience possible. But I'm still competitive, and it still hurts. So that's the I think it's. And that was why we'd love to hear from listeners here in terms of we should be judging schoolboy programs not on silverware and shirts on a wall and stuff like that, but by legacy creators. Has somebody gone into a school and built a program? Let's look at, again, much to my fault here, I don't know the name of who's running the Cardinal Newman's program, but there is someone there who is building a program out of something.
Wes, I can't remember his surname, but Wes, yeah.
There you go. That which is great. You look at, some people have moved on, but you look at, I'm trying to think now, what Chris Davies is doing at Gordon. So these are kind of like emerging ones. Or then obviously, we've talked about it, but then on the other end, you've got people like John Mallett at Millfield and Simon Mulholland at Sedbergh, who've been there, and Wilco at Wycliffe, been in position a long time and have got genuine legacies of kind of hundreds of players now scattered through
genuine legacies and genuine
national.
development of the way that they do things, because the
Yeah.
way that school rugby is coached, the way that school rugby is viewed, the circumstances around injuries in terms of the way that's changed, the way that school coaching has to change in their time periods in those schools has shifted massively. What a week in the life of a school player and a school coach looked like in 2009 is not the same as what it would look like nowadays. In almost every aspect. And to stay in it for that long and adapt and evolve and change with those times is difficult, because it's shifted enormously. We talk about school rugby being sort of almost professional looking at that top end now, which is true, but in many aspects it's moved away from that as well, in that it is much more about the development of the person and the player and all the rest of it. Whereas if you look back to kind of just over a decade ago, less professional in terms of how it looks compared to the pro game, but actually in terms of some of the kind of more hard-nosed attitudes, in an odd way, much more professional. So the shift is enormous.
Yeah, and there were some characters in the game a while ago who aren't involved anymore, and there's been a change of ethos, and that's been really good, and I think it's been really healthy in school. But we're both passionate about the schoolboy game, so we believe, and I think we both believe it's in a good place, which is why the work that Next Gen does across the whole piece to give it a platform, and why we do this podcast is to try and shine a light on it. Maybe we can create a coaching team here. I don't think this has to be one person, so because do send in suggestions, because we don't,
we can throw in an attack and a defense and someone to put the tunes on in the bus on the way back. There's a space for all.
And kind of let us know kind of if you're listening to this as a player or a parent, and you think your director of rugby, head of rugby, master in charge of rugby, the teacher that runs rugby at your school, with someone who's going above and beyond, building a great culture, who's helped, you're an old boy and they helped you get that place in uni, or they've helped you, when you've struggled at work, are you still in touch with them? Are they still part of your life? Like it's I think that those sorts of things, because that's what we're interested in. It's not, prepped as well for this game with a video session that meant we got over the line and won. Like for me, that isn't the bit. It's that kind of that bigger piece around impact, on young people's lives. And so, we're not going to pretend to know everything about every school head of rugby here. So we do need a bit of input from listeners. We know there are, we know a decent amount between us. You've got, as you've shown today with your Willie John McBride, a bit of knowledge, pretty encyclopedic knowledge.
I hold a lot of useless information. I'm not so sure about the useful stuff
of the schoolboy game, and so we'll definitely have our thoughts on coming up with it. But hearing from other people,
we definitely want to hear. I've got one more question for you on the coach stuff. But first, I'm going to tell you about my best school coach and worst school coach. I can tell you the name of the best one. I probably won't throw the
let's not.
But the best one is now an assistant. Is he an assistant head, deputy head, something like that at Millfield. Craig Middleton. I actually saw him the other week when I was at Millfield. But the reason he is best coach was he was my coach as an under 14, and I was small.
Your first year at Uppingham.
Yeah, and I was small. I'd arrived as a scrum half, but I was a scrum half because I was small. I wasn't a scrum half because that was what I was good at. And he said, so I got told I wasn't going to be playing in the back line. I was going to be moving to the forwards. So I dropped down to the twos, and he was the coach of the twos. And he moved me into hooker, and I was finding it unbelievably tough. I mean, basically everything I knew about rugby had just been taken away, and I was doing something completely different. And I remember at the end of one training session, he just put his arm around me and he went, "You'll play flanker for the first 15 in sit form." I was like, okay, fair enough. I buy into it then. And that's the reason he's the best coach I ever had, because that one line just made me buy into whatever we were doing. I could have easily, if it had been the wrong line, just stopped rugby right there, because I was in a place where I didn't understand why I was being shifted around. The people hadn't been able to explain it. I couldn't really get it. Once I got to that sixth form, the worst coach I ever had, for basically the same reason. He dropped me for a couple of games, and he dropped me with the line, I need you to play more like a proper open side. Go away and do that. I went, no one's ever told me what that is.
It sounds a bit of a...
I was like,
sit down and talk about what the why and the what of that.
Yeah, I was like, I don't have a problem with, I don't necessarily mind getting dropped. I mean, I'm not happy about it, but I don't necessarily mind getting dropped. But if you're gonna tell me that, you've got to tell me what being a proper open side in your view is, so that I can do it. But it never came, and I was too young to necessarily know that I needed to ask the question of, okay, well, so what does that mean? I was a 16-year-old kid. Sometimes it's on the adult to answer 100%. The question that's not been asked yet. But it was an interesting thing. But both of those things had nothing I mean, they were rugby conversations, but they were all to do with what the conversation was, rather than any technical coaching aspect or anything. And I think that's probably reflected for huge amounts of people across the country, that actually it's nothing to do with what's happening on the pitch necessarily. It's about the communication around it and sort of engaging people and getting them to understand. And one of those guys was theoretically a top coach, and the other one was a under 14Bs coach. And
that's, I think, is what jumped out to me. There was quality of conversation and clear empathy. It's feedback in its way, isn't it? And one was motivational, showed an understanding of you, had clearly spotted that you were struggling, but you engaged with rugby and didn't want to lose this person. There's a huge pastoral element to that. And the other comment was lacking in that. At first team level, you'd want some actual technical feedback on, well, okay, look, we're not going to select you this week because I need you. This is what we want you to bring. It's breakdown work, it's set piece work, it's
one of those where if you have that conversation with someone in their mid-20s, they go, okay, I see what you mean, that'll be X, Y, Z. For 16-year-old doesn't necessarily know.
So it's really that's and I think, as you said, I think that would be a lot of people, that they're the things that leave an impact in my view. And so it's please do reach out with people, particularly guys who are kind of recently in the time period we're looking at, if you're that kind of 2012 onwards, I guess, but coaches who have impacted your experience. We want to hear about that. And these guys work really hard, let's hear them, and we'll try and put together a team.
We're very short on time, so my last question for you on kind of just about coaching is, at senior level, for the first time, you've got year groups mixing, which must create a very unusual environment, in that you now have a hierarchy element. You now have players who might be better players, who are the younger players coming in, and school environment is very different to a professional environment, where a younger player, if they're better, they play. If they're better, everyone understands they're better, and they may take on that leadership element. But in a school environment, there's more at play than just the team. There's the wider school environment. What's that person's relationship with the older people like? What's that like to actually be the person that's in charge of, and trying to meld all that together into going, well, look, he's really good and he's 16, he's going to be your fly half and he's going to lead this, or whatever, whatever it might be.
Look, it's really difficult, and I wouldn't have claimed to ever cracked it. It's quite often about, again, building. Most schools now, not certainly any program I've worked with, we've had a leadership group, and you've probably decided most of that going into the season. And so it's, look, the players have got to take some ownership of. You quite often talk, if guys have had a poor experience as lower six, if they felt the upper six were not inclusive, you'd be like, right, well, why were they not inclusive? What happened? What were the actions that they did? Right, well, let's now make sure we don't do them. So how can we change that? What can you do away from when I'm there? Because, you know, again, players will generally get it right in front of lead coaches, first 15 coaches. It's, as you said, it's what happens away from training, what's being discussed at lunch in boarding houses. That's where some of these things can fester and go wrong, and you can get this kind of hierarchy of, well, I'm the upper six, so I should get more touches, and it's all this or whatever, or I should start. So you've got to try and, you know, pre-season, you know, whether that's taking the group away, doing some stuff, getting an external voice in, you know, your leadership group, your captains, you know, and I've been fortunate enough to work with some great young people who've really got people involved. You then need to try and encourage those. Really, if you've got younger guys who you really think are key to you, it's that difficult balance of, look, we know we need this player, but you also don't want to embarrass them. If you say, look, we need to give the ball to X, like, you know, all right, look, we know that if we get the ball in Angus's hands like 10 times, we're going to score a lot of, we're going to do really well. Actually,
no one's ever said that, mate.
But I'm probably making your life more difficult there, because I'm kind of calling you out in different ways. Whilst I'm giving you positive praise, it's like, oh, look at you, yeah, that can end up having a negative connotation. So you've got to manage that well. And I think for me, it comes back to your relationship with the group. It's small conversations. Again, maybe not addressing the whole group, but having little conversations with senior players about, you know, if there's new, how are they settling in, how they're going in house, and just kind of helping, that small conversations. And then it gets more complex again if you've got an under 16 who's pushing hard. You know, how do we, you know, if you're talking about, if there's a year 11 who, you know, for the sake of their own development, probably needs to play first team rugby, but then they might supplant an upper sixth. Well, that's a really hard.
Yeah, the dynamic gets difficult.
Yeah, like, do you go, actually, this is a school environment, the experience is valuable, like this could be, this upper sixth lad is, you know, going to take so much from this, or do you focus on the needs of the individual in terms of, look, this guy we think is really high potential, they need to be exposed. That's where cups are useful, different games are useful, and really good coaches get that balance right and try and keep, you can never keep everybody happy, but you try and give enough game time to the upper sixth boy and enough game time to the year 11 boy that they both feel they've been developed and been valued. And I think you can get to a point where, you know, I'm trying to think, like, our average in most years I've coached school teams has been getting close to 40 players have been used. You know, you get through a lot of bodies. If all of those guys can, and I'm not saying I've ever achieved this, if they can feel valued, then you've done something right. And that's the but that bit there is really hard. And again, hearing from people about how that's been managed well at their school would be a really interesting thing.
And I guess one of the more, well, I mean, it's a difficult thing to manage no matter what, but I guess it becomes even trickier if you have those younger age group players who they play in key leadership positions in a team. If you had your 8, 9, 10, say, who were lower sixth players, you're really asking them to run the game for you. And yet that social dynamic within a school environment, that suddenly means that you've got, regardless of who's got the C next to their name, that 8, 9, 10 is always going to, in any rugby team, manage the way that a team moves around the pitch, and they're having to lead those older players. So those small dynamics can be, I imagine, a huge challenge just in terms of...
It's hard. And sometimes you can have, you know, when you get majority lower sixth teams, you know, if you kind of have 9, 10, 11 lower sixth boys in your first team, that can make it difficult. How do you manage that? How do the upper sixth, who might have been 18 players all the way through, who now find themselves in the second team, they might be 13 players as lower sixth, but now someone's coming. There's loads of things that, you know, again, they're the bits that are tricky to manage and getting that right. And I think for me, and I think, you know, look, got as much wrong as ever got right in terms of, people went always, but it's, it's trying to build good relationships with kind of the player, understand, with their kind of their housemaster when you're in a boarding environment, and their parents, so that people know the whole picture. They understand why they're being selected, what you're trying to do. Communication and relationships is massive to it, and I think it'll be interesting. I think that will be a theme that will come out with the feedback we get, and I know we've both got our ideas of guys we think of in the last sort of 10 years being super impactful in their environment. Yeah. So it'll be a cool one to talk about next week.
Certainly will, but we'll get into it all next week, because I've taken more than enough of your time and the listeners' time with my my views on everything. So, yeah. But do, as Dan says, please get in touch on at NextGen15 on all platforms. We really, really want to hear from other coaches, from parents, from pupils, from past pupils about who they want to see as the coach of this unbelievable team that we've managed to cobble together. Because it's a fascinating area, and to be honest, at a schoolboy level, it's the most important area, far more than who the individuals are. But that's it for today. Episode 13 is done and dusted. You can catch us on Acast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Please do download, subscribe, rate, review, listen, all the rest of it. It's all good stuff and very helpful, and we appreciate it. And as I say, get in touch on at NextGen15 with your thoughts on Coach of the Decade, and also give us a shout on what happens over the course of the weekend, your views on top 5 teams of the weekend, because there's loads and loads to get through, and I need to keep giving Limitless a shout out so we get more and more of that warm clothing. But cheers for joining me, Dan. Good to have you back. And
thanks for having me. Great to be back.
Yeah, nice to have you. And we'll catch up again next week. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. We will catch you next time.